grounds. They have signed several agreements with the government. There are cabinet decisions making reference, for instance, Madam Speaker, to the construction of certain facilities. In fact, I want to refer you to the cabinet decision dated April 28, 2006, and I quote, "Cabinet also noted that the proposed power station, which would be capable of producing 50.9 megawatts of electricity, would be located north of the existing generation compound at the Crabs Peninsula on land described as follows." And it described the lands, Madam Speaker. The reality is something went wrong with this deal with the Hadids. Madam Speaker, there is, and let me tell you, Madam Speaker, this thing has been in the public domain for at least 3 years, 2.5 years, 3 years. Madam Speaker, when the news broke that they were entering into this deal with APC, I wrote a document, I wrote a paper on the issue. This paper is dated July 25th, 2006, and I quote from it, Madam Speaker, and let me make it abundantly clear, especially for the benefit of the public. I am not holding any remit for the Hadids. Fair is fair. I am not defending any power monopoly in this country by any private entity. And this is a position that I've taken before, several years ago. I wrote about it, but Madam Speaker, fair is fair. And I think that at the end of the day, the crisis is due to incompetent leadership, Madam Speaker. But just a quote from this document, which I'll also make available, Madam Speaker, to this Honorable House. I indicated, for instance, that I was absolutely flabbergasted by the brazen decision of the UPP government to award APC additional power generation, both in the context of the monopoly that will be created and in the context of the conflict of interest involving the ministerial responsibilities of the Honorable Aziz Hadid, a senior minister in the UPP administration, and his role as majority shareholder and shadow director of APC, the single largest private contractor of government services. The paper continues, Madam Speaker. I spoke about the fact that they will control over 70% of power generation in this country for 22 years, and that is untenable. It is here. In fact, just like you, Honorable Prime Minister, member for Rural West, I even said too that the Hadids have been very kind to me, but I have to support good governance in this country. Documented here. Madam Speaker, just to paraphrase this document, I went on to say that 3 years later, there has been a volte-face, and once again, when a seemingly reasonable decision to diversify the ownership of power generation by senior members of the UPP government, including the Honorable Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister, it was actually reversed using the farcical excuse of financial constraints and the need for a quick decision to meet the needs of Cricket World Cup. So, Madam Speaker, they actually reversed themselves, because at one point, the Honorable Member for St. Philip South, he went to an Observer Radio, famous statement, that he's not going to support any private monopoly. Then a few months later, we heard that they're entering into this agreement with APC to give them 50.9 more megs of power, some joint venture agreement in which the Hadid company, or group of companies, APC would have held 55% and the government 45%. And Madam Speaker, I opposed it then. So I'm not making any argument or any case in support of any private monopoly. I'm just trying to catalog what happened and to support my point that the crisis that exists today is due to incompetent leadership, Madam Speaker. The document continues. I am sure that a number of temporary measures could have been explored and introduced to satisfy the additional demand for power during the Cricket World Cup, including the rental of generator sets, or perhaps by refurbishing one or two of the existing power plants, including Tango and Fries Hill, which, according to some experts, would take less than 10 million EC dollars to refurbish. And at that time, I was actually relying on information from Desta Jah, a former member of the APUA board. The document reads too that the concentration of this business opportunity into the hands of a single family by the UPP government to the exclusion of other stakeholders and to the detriment of the citizenry is inequitable. Continues, how could the UPP government, the APUA, enter into private negotiations with APC for the provision of additional power generation under the guise of a partnership without going to tender? Is this the new definition of transparency and accountability? Is this good governance? Isn't this in contravention of the Integrity in Public Life and the Prevention of Corruption Acts? The UPP government boasted in the first few months of its administration about its commitment to transparency and accountability, but these once valued principles now appear to be, in an oxymoronic sense, valueless values of the UPP government. This is how I saw it then, and I'm saying here, I stand by my position 2.5 years ago today. And I'm going through this, Madam Speaker, so that nobody in this country get the impression that Gaston Browne is supporting any monopoly for any private entity in this country. But not only was I critical, there were suggested solutions. And let me say too, this document was carried in its entirety by the Antigua Sun. So this is public knowledge. The solutions that I proposed, Madam Speaker, in this document included the following. Corporatization, in which a new power generation company would be formed to function as a commercial entity while remaining under public ownership, similar to APUA PCS. This methodology has been successfully implemented by APUA in the past, thereby creating significant value added for the state, and should be explored as an option going forward. This option is a self-financing one, in which the company could raise capital by borrowing or by floating a portion of its shares on the Eastern Caribbean Stock Exchange, allowing for private participation. Another financing option is to allow locals the opportunity to buy shares in a newly formed private power company with the proviso that no single entity should control more than 20 to 30% of the equity of the company. So here is a recommendation to provide the locals in this country, local individuals and local entities, the opportunity to buy shares in such an entity. It also includes, Madam Speaker, as a recommendation, contracting out the additional power generation to other entities other than APC to avert the creation of a private monopoly. Madam Speaker, that is how I saw it then, and this is how I see it, Madam Speaker, today. In fact, I was also critical about the government's procurement policy 2.5 years ago. At that time, they bought $13 million worth of heavy equipment from Hadid, Madam Speaker. And they actually literally ignored or omitted CPR, a heavy equipment operator, the only heavy equipment dealer in this country. And they went to Hadid instead to buy $13 million worth of equipment. That too is covered in this. And the point I was making there, Madam Speaker, is to have a more equitable distribution of government procurement. Madam Speaker, it goes on. In fact, I said here, should the Honorable Prime Minister and members of his cabinet agree to the introduction of competition law or antitrust laws and policies to break up existing monopolies and to avoid the emergence of future monopolists in these critical sectors of the economy, including telecommunications, energy, and electricity, they can count on my support both within and without the Parliament against these anti-competitive practices which are inimical to national development. I still stand by my statement. So your issue about controlling the monopolistic situation, I am for that. I'm not telling you here that you're supposed to go give Hadid 100% of the power generation of this country. I do not support that. However, the crisis that exists today was caused by your incompetent leadership. Madam Speaker, I also said in this document that the Prime Minister, like myself, is a man from the ghetto who could empathize with the challenges, including the economic inequities faced by the masses, especially the poor and the vulnerable. Therefore, his primary focus should be on the protection and the empowerment of the masses instead of presiding over their disempowerment in the interests of the special interest few.